Why do some orchids' flowers have 3 lips? Is it a mutation? Is it a virus? Is it something else? Because generally we know orchids with only 1 lip like that, and then we see flowers like this. So do we need to be wary of bringing them into our collections? Welcome to the Nature Company. Today we're going to be looking at peloric orchids and how this pyloria comes about, and whether it's dangerous to have them in and around your other orchids, whether it's going to be spread or whether it's only the one that's going to be infected or affected, and whether it's going to stay like this or whether it's going to revert back to what it originally looked like. If this is the kind of information you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already, and that notification bell to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. These two are identical plants from the identical grower. So firstly, let's have a quick look at what they call a peloric orchid. They have 3 lips as opposed to 1 lip and 2 petals. So the petals have changed their identity to look like lips with all those fancy markings. So they do actually look quite spectacular as flowers. And they have what is known as radial symmetry as opposed to bilateral symmetry. So it looks like a starfish with your symmetrical point in the center. Whereas the bilateral symmetry, if you draw a line down the center of the plant, the 2 sides mirror each other. And what causes this? Well, there can be a couple of different causes. One of the main ones is a mutation. It's a mutation in the genes that control the flower part identities. These are known as the Mahat's box genes. And the petals lose their identity and take on the identity of the lip or the labellum. But it's only going to be your main original labellum that is actually going to be a reproductive part of the flower. These other 2 ones are generally non-reproductive units. They're just cosmetic. These mutations can either take place naturally, as they do occasionally out in the wild, or they can be a man-made either by mistake or just pure luck, or with the help of certain things. If you're wanting an orchid that's going to keep this starfish type appearance, this 3 lips, then this is what you're looking for. You're looking for one of these mutated orchids. That way it's going to be a stable orchid. You're going to get these on all its flowers, all of the divisions that you take, and even when you're propagating it, this trait is going to be inherited by its youngsters. One of the other ways that you're going to get this sort of look to your orchid flowers is through epigenetic changes. These are not stable genetic changes. There's been no mutation to the genes itself. It's just the way the genes are expressed has been changed. So this is generally due to environmental conditions. So things like environmental stresses, anything that's going to put enough stress on the genes itself of the plant, whether it's a direct insect bites or whether it's infections, these can cause the genes to be expressed incorrectly and produce your lips as opposed to the petals. But if these stresses are then taken away, your plant will revert back to its original and you'll get your single lip with your petals again. So this is completely unstable. If you particularly like the look of the 3 lips and want to be sure it's going to stay that way, you've got to make sure that it's not environmental stress or tissue culture stress that has caused the plant itself to bloom in this fashion. But a little bit more on this just now. We also get tissue culture-induced peloria. This is due to the somochromal variations. So that's just saying that there's basic random genetic or epigenetic changes in your plant, and that may manifest in the flowers. Hormonal imbalances in your tissue culture media can also cause this, when your cytokinins and your auxins aren't balanced properly. And stress during regeneration can also cause this, where you're producing so many plants from such a small, minute amounts of tissue. The dividing and splitting apart of these cells can also cause stress in the plant, which will cause misexpression of the floral identity genes. So in these cases, your pyloria might not be stable. In some of these cases, as soon as conditions are right again, or as the plant starts to grow, expression of your petals may come back to normal, and you'll land up with your normal bilateral symmetry to your orchid as opposed to having the radial symmetry. So this just means that your genes are now being expressed properly as opposed to being blocked in some sort of way from being properly expressed. This doesn't always land up with your lip being expressed on all the petals, but sometimes it can be the petals being expressed all the way around, but that's far less common. And also in these cases, it may not necessarily be hereditary. So it's not going to pass this trait on to youngsters if it's being fertilized. And also doing divisions, you're probably not going to have the same trait being passed on because it's only due to those stresses that caused the misexpression of the genes. And what about viral infections? Can this be caused by viral infections? Actually, it can be, but generally not, because viral infections can cause sort of distortions of your flower. Generally, you're going to be getting those splotches or streaks across your flower of different colors, and occasionally you'll get malformation of your flowers themselves, but generally they're not going to be symmetrical at all. They'll probably just be deformed. Also, you'll notice in the leaves of your plant as well, if it has that viral infection, you'll see that mottling or that almost like mosaic-like appearance to the leaves. So this sort of peloric orchid is generally not a viral infected orchid. And why are peloric orchids so common in tissue culture? For one, you're giving your ratios of successful mutation a bigger chance in the long run because you're doing such large quantities in such a short time. So in nature, that may have taken hundreds or thousands of years to produce that many plants from a single plant, whereas in the tissue lab, you can do that so quickly. Yes, it is going to take a couple of years for your plant to mature to see whether you do have a peloric one. There are, of course, lab tests that can be done now, genetic tests, but to be able to understand whether that then is going to be a stable mutation or not, often you have to allow your plant to grow and see through a couple of progressive seasons whether your pyloria stays or not. And then also, once you have a peloric plant, one of the easiest ways to produce multiples of it is then again through tissue culture. So that's why tissue culture is the main source of peloric orchids. The main orchids that you're going to see pyloria in is Phalaenopsis. You'll see it relatively frequently in Cymbidiums, Dendrobiums, and even Cattleya, and also Oncidium. Often the intergeneric hybrids are more susceptible to them. So as I've just said, the main way that they come about and that we are able to get them now is through that colonal propagation. Tissue culture marries stem culture, and that way they can clone it and produce hundreds of thousands of exactly the same plant. And generally, they'll only do that after they have screened the orchid itself for stability of your pyloria, because it's pointless then trying to propagate something up that is just going to start reverting back to what it originally was. And then also through selective breeding. So choosing orchids that have now got the peloric trait to them, we either interbreed them with other varieties, hoping that that pyloria will then be inherited by the new generation. Invariably, some of those seedlings will be peloric, whereas depending on whether it's going to be the dominant trait or not as to how many seedlings will be peloric as opposed to bilaterally symmetrical. And then also through self-pollination. This way you can land up with some variations, but still keeping some of those main characteristics. And then of course, there's what some people throw their arms up in the air about and say it's wrong. It's breeding mutations. Here it's forcing orchids to mutate. It's inducing mutation through the use of gamma radiation or chemicals. Colchicine is one of the chemicals that's used quite frequently. It helps by doubling up the chromosome content in the cells, which obviously gives the cells more of a chance for more different variations to be produced. So you may land up with some wild, strange things happening, and you're never sure whether it's going to be successful or not. And of course, those plants that have shown their ability for that epigenetic change, if you are able to reproduce the environment that they were in originally, where they were peloric, you may be able to force them to change back from being bilaterally symmetrical to being radially symmetrical again. But that's going to be very difficult to do. You might never be able to get those conditions right again, and then to be able to keep the plant in that state to ensure that you keep getting those flowers is going to be extremely difficult. So probably not even worth trying. Personally, I find peloric orchids particularly beautiful, but some people think they're an aberration. So love them or hate them, they're probably here to stay. Drop in the comments as to whether you prefer them or whether you prefer the way orchids are naturally. Although this does come naturally at some point as well. So let's just put that out there too. And if you saw this in your local orchid shop, would you prefer to buy this or would you prefer to buy that? Yeah, we do notice that there is definitely a change in color because it's taken on almost the entire coloration of the lip itself, and you've basically lost all this deep, dark burgundy color, as it's only available now in the sepals and you can't see any in the petals at all. So you just land up with this maroonness over as opposed to this almost darker, deep, rich royal color. These two are identical plants from the identical grower, all produced through tissue culture that we imported from Thailand. So obviously mass produced, and again there, as I've explained to you about tissue culture, it's more likely that you're going to get the chance of having an aberrant plant. So we were just lucky that this was actually a stable mutation and not just one of those epigenetic one-offs. And if all I've done is confused you all the more, go down to that Buy Me a Coffee link down below. Ed posts up a lot of information on orchids there all the time. And if you have found any of the information that we've provided in any of our videos helpful in your orchid journey and would like to show appreciation, you can buy us a coffee there too. Also, don't be shy, sign up, become a member, and grow like a pro. And thank you for watching. If you find any of this information helpful, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, bing bong, to be notified of all our upcoming content so you don't miss out on a thing. Help us grow as we help your orchids grow.